Why do the most successful people often feel the most unsatisfied? Today, we're going to have a look at why even successful CEOs and C-suite and top leaders feel unhappy. We're going to look at something called imposter syndrome and the paradox of success. Now, I've been coaching high achievers since 2013, and I've noticed trends where people who are often very successful by everybody else's standards are also often very unhappy. Why does high achievement negatively correlate with satisfaction and enjoyment of life? I'll start by sharing a story about one of my clients, Lynn, who has basically crushed it since she was a teen. She has come from a very difficult home environment, and she took that as kind of motivation and ambition to get out on her own, to be independent, to never be controlled by anyone. And so she went out there and she crushed it. Job after job, she climbed the ladder. She just got better and better at what she did. She got more and more responsibility, got paid more. Seems like every time one door closed, 20 other doors opened. She just kept doing better and better, and yet still feels like she's not good enough. Still feels like she's an imposter, that she's going to be found out as being this kind of fraud who isn't really deserving of the success she's had, and hyper focused on her failures and weaknesses, completely dismissing or overlooking the massive achievements she's made over decades. So there's a core contradiction there. Achievement increases, fulfillment decreases. Now, a lot of people who haven't achieved highly don't believe in this. They would mock people who would complain about being successful because they just don't understand that the more you get, the more hungrier you get. It actually gets less satisfying as you achieve more. Think about money. Who do you think's more insecure and more needy about money? The guy with a stable income that doesn't change? Or the guy who keeps making more money over time? Again, your logic would tell you that the guy with the stable income would be needier for money, but actually he barely thinks about money. He's gotten into a kind of status quo, a plateau, where everything's just the same every month. He doesn't need to think about it. But the guy who keeps adding zeros to his paycheck is constantly trying to figure out how to add more zeros. He's actually needier, more insecure about his finances than the guy who hasn't had a pay rise in years. One of the most fascinating things about human psychology that I've ever discovered is it's chasing that causes the need to chase. It was first made aware to me when I was trying to quit smoking, when somebody pointed out that my need for a cigarette was caused by my previous cigarette. That if we go all the way back through the chain to before my first cigarette, there was no need for a cigarette. There was peer pressure and wanting to be cool and all that, but the actual need for a cigarette didn't exist until after I'd had one. And that the need I have right now is from the one I previously had. And when I realized that, it became so much easier to quit because I realized it's not the next one that's going to satisfy me. The next one's going to cause the need for the one after that. This applies to money, working out, eating, all these things. The need you feel was caused by the last time you chased the need. The last time you tried to fulfill it is the reason you feel hungry now. Now, of all the social media platforms, I think LinkedIn is by far the cringiest. From my point of view, when I'm focused on integrity and honesty, that's got to be the most dishonest platform of all of them, by far. Like, it's not even close. I'm not even sure who these posts are for. Who's reading them and thinking, well, that was great that I read that? I mean, people are liking and commenting, congrats on your new job and all that. But if I read the post, it's just nonsense. Now, what's behind those posts? Bad people? No. Behind those posts are people who are desperately seeking the next win, and they need to project an air of confidence and success because if you saw how they really felt, you would pity them. They're burned out, they feel empty, got a chronic dissatisfaction, a growing sense of dread that there is no way to be satisfied, that the more they achieve, the more they become aware that this isn't working, and yet they can't think of anything else to do, and they're compulsively achieving. The more ostensibly happy someone appears on the outside, the more unhappy they are on the inside. Now, there'll be exceptions to that rule, but I did see some research that showed that the more frequently a couple posts about themselves on Facebook, the more likely they are to break up. Right? The more someone tries to project an image that things are going well, and you see this on LinkedIn all the time, these people try to push this image out like, look how well I'm doing, I'm okay. The more they do that, the more I'm like, oh, bro, you ain't well. Because I worked with these people. I know what's happening behind the scenes. I know what's behind those posts. It's really fascinating for me to work with a sort of C-suite executive, somebody who's high up in the corporate ladder, And as I'm working with them, I'm also watching their LinkedIn feed. And I'm like, dude, what's going on? Because that person in LinkedIn is not the person I'm talking to every week who's barely holding it together. So let's look at my little thesis on how to deal with this. How is it that a high achiever can actually enjoy their life rather than getting more miserable the more they achieve? Well, it really comes down to a lot of inner distortions, a lot of belief issues, limiting beliefs, if you want to call them that quietly undermine your enjoyment of success, a operating system that actually makes it impossible to enjoy your life when you're trying to achieve things, even though the whole time it's telling you that trying to achieve things is how you'll enjoy your life. There are some key beliefs that you'll need to tackle. The belief that more is better, the quantitative belief, that always chasing the next shiny object, the next win, the next finish line, the next accolade, the next pay rise, that's always going to be something that makes your life better. If you just stop and look for a second, you'll see that that's not true. I'm not moralizing here. I've got nothing against people doing well. But you'll see that more does not create higher quality of inner being. In fact, it seems to correlate with the opposite. The more you get, the less able you are to be satisfied. So there's a belief problem there that more is better when maybe something else is better. Another belief I call the finish line fallacy. This idea, this vague sense that if I can just do enough, whatever the hell that is, I will cross this kind of finish line and all my suffering will finally end. Yeah, Jim Carrey does a great little speech about this where he's like,
I dream about being three-time Golden Globe winning actor Jim Carrey. Because then I would be enough. It would finally be true. And I could stop this terrible search.
this idea that if you almost feel like you're satisfied, almost feel like you're good enough, then maybe the next thing is what will get you over the line, rather than realizing there is no line. There's no place where you are satisfied. The human brain cannot be permanently satisfied, so constant achievements actually erode your ability to be content. The fear of happiness, cherophobia as it's known. A lot of high achievers are driven by an actual fear that enjoying yourself too much will cause some kind of disaster to come your way, like you're tempting fate. This idea that it'll all be taken away if you sit still and relax and enjoy yourself, that you must always be stressed, always be moving on to the next goal, never really sitting around and smelling the roses. Basically, this idea that if you're happy, you'll be punished. The distortion between real and imagined danger, not knowing the difference between something that's an actual threat that you can see and measure and verify versus one you made up in your head and get anxious about, even though statistically it's very unlikely. Quite often, overachievers are trying to prevent all these anticipated imagined disasters from happening, and none of them are really ever going to come true. And even if they did come true, they wouldn't even be that bad. And of course, what I simply call emotional attachment to outcomes. Having your sense of worth and your sense of quality of life attached to things that you don't actually control that much, but you have some influence on, like how much money you make, or who likes you, or how much status you have, or how well the project went. All these things that somebody else could ruin for you that's not entirely under your control, but your whole sense of who you are as a person, your identity, your worth is all attached to it going well. This is a recipe for disaster no matter how competent you are. So if you want to be successful and enjoy your life, you're going to have to tackle your beliefs about what it actually means to be successful and have a deep, dark, honest look at why you feel so motivated to achieve so highly all the time. What if the reason that you're unable to enjoy your success is because you have a secret fear of being happy? Now, I've been coaching people for a long time, and this is one of the hardest belief shifts they ever have to make because everyone seems to truly believe that we are trying to be happy. The idea that they might actually be trying to prevent happiness seems so ridiculous that they've never considered it, and yet it perfectly explains their patterns of behavior. So we're going to have a look at this weird belief, this weird fear, and try to figure out why is it that people achieve to keep themselves unhappy. Now this one applies to nearly every client I've ever had, but I want to tell you about one called Andy. If you met him and heard about his life circumstances, you would probably be jealous. He's in the top 1% of pretty much every category there is. Financially, he's got a wonderful family, he's in fantastic physical shape, he's endurance athlete. There's pretty much nothing this guy doesn't have. He's living the dream, but if you knew what it was like inside his brain, you would be shocked at how unhappy he is. He's ticked all the boxes you're supposed to tick, and yet he spends a vast majority of his time, or at least before working with me, he did, feeling incredibly anxious and catastrophizing disasters in his imagination. So let's have a look at what's going on in Andy's mind that stops him from enjoying doing everything right. So just recently I came across a term that finally defines something I've known about for decades, which is cherophobia. Short version is the fear of being happy or being content, an aversion to anything that might lead to you enjoying yourself. People who have this tend to behave in a way that actually prevents long-term happiness or pleasure, celebration. While it might look like they're striving to succeed and make their life better, if you look closely, especially their micro behaviors, they really don't let themselves actually have any fun. Most of my clients describe it as a sense of fate, this idea that there are scales of judgment out there, and that if you enjoy yourself too much, if you get too far ahead of yourself, get too complacent with how well things are going, there will be a reckoning, a balancing act, where everything will be taken away or you'll be severely harmed in some vague way. This kind of sense that so long as you're stressed and worrying and not really enjoying your achievements, you'll be allowed to keep them. But if you chill out and go, fucking, I'm crushing it, I'm a really good person, God or fate or something will look at that and be like, right, this guy needs some humbling. I'm going to crush him. So generally, that's what they have in common, this idea that they're being judged, that there is some sort of karma out there, that you can't enjoy yourself too much, and that the punishment for enjoying yourself too much is it will all be taken away, whatever that means. This leads them to basically really never be enough. They set up systems where they're never good enough. They always have to keep moving. They can't stop and chill out. Nothing's ever finished. No achievement is high enough. There's always a kind of sense of lack, and they actually prefer having that sense of lack. They get quite anxious and worried when there's nothing to do and things are going well and everything's on point. They will actually self-sabotage to create new problems just to get rid of the unease of everything going so well. This is actually one of the reasons they're so successful and why they achieve so much is they're constantly solving problems. They don't let anything kind of get carried away. Because what happens to a high achiever is when things start going well, they get paranoid and suspicious. It's just a sense that this ain't right, that something bad's going to happen. They feel very reluctant to enjoy anything or accept accolades. They're resistant to compliments and praise. They push back on these things. I mean, they can accept those things and they can occasionally enjoy themselves so long as they know that there are problems still unfixed, so long as that they can, sort of play false humble or self-deprecating in a way that kind of balances it out. But they can't just keep cruising and enjoy themselves. They can't acknowledge that they are crushing it and that they're doing really well consistently over time and that they're a great person. They would feel like that's too much of a provocation, that it's going to lead to some sort of disaster. So essentially, they have a superstitious belief, which is quite ironic because they're usually high achievers are quite rational, creative people. They're usually pretty good at solving problems in a way that actually solves the problem, otherwise they wouldn't be so successful. But then they have these weird superstitious beliefs like if things get good, something bad must follow. The idea that the universe is wired in some way to balance things out. There's zero evidence for this whatsoever, but they believe it very strongly. I think it comes from childhood conditioning, that they're raised in such a way where this was true, that anything good was followed by bad. And it usually meant that good and bad were actually the same thing. So, for example, if you succeeded, you'd still get punished for the success. Let's say a child wins the race. If they've got hypercritical pressure parents, as I call them, then the parent might say, like, well, you didn't win it by much. And so that wasn't really a win. They actually got a criticism for the win. But of course, they get a much more brutal criticism if they lost the race. So they're stuck in this rock and a hard place situation where they have to win, but it's not going to feel like a win. I see this even in basic culture. Like when I came to the Czech Republic, if you're talking to someone, the first question is kind of like, are you married yet? Right? So that's the first achievement you've got to get. And you think, okay, I'll go get married. And on your wedding day, they'll be like, so are you going to have a kid? Like you're still not finished, right? And on the day that you give birth to your first kid, they'll be like, "Are you thinking about a second kid?" And this shit just never ends. There is no accomplishment that satisfies anyone for more than a couple of hours before you get this immediately the sense that you lack something, that you failed. So success and failure become combined as a single thing. You can't have one without the other. But total failure you can have without any success. So your choice is really like, do I have a win fail or a fail fail? It's not a hard choice to make, but there's no win-win. There's no just I get to enjoy something and nobody takes anything away from me. There's also the problem where every time you succeed, it resets the bottom line. When a high achiever succeeds, that just becomes the new expectation. So your personal best becomes now the thing you can't go below, which of course is very hard to do, and eventually you are going to slip. So your personal best won't be something you can beat the next day, and now you feel like a failure, even though your original starting position was way down there. Right? So somebody who goes to the gym and they can't quite lift as much as they lifted last week feels like an abject failure, and they sort of fail to notice that they're lifting twice as much as they did just 2 months ago. That doesn't matter to them because the new baseline means that all taste and enjoyment is taken out of anything that isn't a win. And so people start to also do this weird correlation thing where they link things that aren't actually linked and they create these partnerships of good and bad. So let's say you're sick, it would be because you were happy last week. You'll think, ah, see, I deserve this. I knew this was coming. If your birthday sucked, it was because you got too excited about it. And if the client quits, it's because you were happy that you signed up a client last week. This idea that these are connected, that you're getting punished for each win, knowing that, of course, you could also just plain lose all of them, so you've only got this choice of win and lose together as a combo. So you actually start creating that combo by just arbitrarily connecting events that have nothing to do with each other. So this fear, this cherophobia, keeps high achievers and leaders stuck on this horrible treadmill where the faster you run, the more you stay in the same place. You never feel safe to relax, enjoy whatever it is you've achieved, to kind of just chill and go like, I've done enough for quite a while actually. It just always feels like you've got to keep moving just to stay in the same place. There's a sense of competition. You can't relax because it will be taken away by some other. Sometimes this will be quite specific. I think at work, if you take a week off, somebody else will steal your job or your clients. And other times it's just a vague sense as you're relaxing, this agitation where you just feel like you should be doing something productive or something bad will happen. I remember seeing an interview with Will Smith way, way back in the day, the actor, where he was saying that he will outperform anybody else. That he doesn't care if you got more talent than him because he'll just stay on the treadmill longer than you and outpace you. And everyone praised him for that kind of advice or wisdom, and that was before we realized kind of how badly he's doing. I mean, if you read the book Will by Mark Manson, you're reading the book of a high achiever who cannot be satisfied, a person who won everything and still never felt good enough, and still had a disastrous home life and family life because he was so obsessed with his success. He looked like he was having a good time. All the time he looked like he was having a good time. But if the book is even half true, behind that was just this constant need and anxiety and desperation. I mean, he often felt triumphant, but he felt the need to brag about his wins all the time as well, and that's not what a satisfied person does. So the solution to cherophobia is deep and dark, but it's essentially about breaking patterns and behaving as somebody who's not superstitious. It will feel like massive risk taking, like leap of faith, where you're going to actually sit back and rest and relax and enjoy yourself and tempt fate into punishing you for doing so well. One of the ways to do this is set hard time limits, working 8 hours a day, for example, 5 days a week. Most of you probably do far more than that. Make it there's a certain time where work stops and you are not allowed to achieve anything. All right, that you're not allowed to be productive, that your phone's off, that you don't check emails, that you're not available, and just let the world burn without you. Let it all come crashing down if that's what's needed for you to have some time out to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Of course, redefining achievement will go a long way. Achievement is not about the so-called productivity of quantity, of just doing more and more and more and win, 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 up, up, up all the time. Achievement should be about quality of life over quantity of accomplishments. I mean, you having a wonderful half hour with your daughter, where it's just you and her together building memories, is such a bigger win than you getting the next contract with the big client who you're never going to remember when you're old. You also need to face your fear by actually taking on compliments and accolades. When somebody says you did well, just say thanks. Don't push back on it and try to undermine it. Be aware and shameless about your strengths. When someone asks what you do, tell them that you do it well if you do it well. And don't try to appear to be humble and modest and qualify yourself to try and prevent that fate from finding you. Just go, yeah, I'm doing well. I'm happy. You know that guilt you get when you're doing really well and then you're around someone who's not, and you feel the need to kind of outdo them with how much you're suffering. So you make up a big song and dance about how it looks like you're doing well, but you're actually not. How about just saying you're doing well, even if it makes them envious or resentful of you? Just hold it instead of trying to downplay it. And what's really important is measuring your skills and your efforts rather than your accomplishments, your results. What did you do and why did you do it? Not what did it cause? Because the results aren't actually under your control. You can do everything right and lose. You can do everything wrong and win. It's not really an accurate measure of who you are as a person. But why did you do the thing and how did you do it? Are you putting in efforts that you're proud of? Are you doing it for reasons that feel honorable to you? If that's the case, then that's what you measure, and you train yourself out of measuring the outcomes and results. Is your mind inventing threats that don't exist and ruling your life with your imagination? After coaching high achievers for so long, I've come to the opinion that they are afraid of ghosts, which is to say, they live in a world that is largely fictional, their imagination, and that most of the problems they're trying to solve and most of the worries they have are about things for which there is no evidence. It leads highly successful people to be oddly superstitious and irrational, which makes no sense given how successful they are. But you'll notice that if you pay attention, the more successful someone becomes, the crazier they get. So we're going to have a look now at how our mind fucks with us by keeping us in a near constant fight or flight state, even though our lives are relatively safe. So let's talk about why high achievers and top leaders are often in constant fight or flight situation, very stressed, even though they might not appear to be on the outside. Now, this isn't exclusive to high achievers. All humans have a problem differentiating real risk from imagined risk. You could describe it as the difference between fear and anxiety. As they talk about in the movie Inside Out, fear is dealing with the threat you can see, anxiety is dealing with the threat you can't see. The higher you achieve, the more potential can't see threats you start to imagine, which is ironic because you actually have less of them. Somebody who's in poverty without much support in a dangerous country has far more real threats to deal with. But ironically, they are often going to be less anxious than the CEO of a Fortune 500 company who has a wonderful family. Our perception of what's real and what we should be responding to is very difficult to manage because in the mind, they are one and the same. As the actor Jim Carrey once said, we don't know the difference between a dog that's going to eat us in our mind and a dog that's actually going to eat us. And so we're constantly in fight or flight response. When you imagine something really badly happen, and as you're imagining it, this like emotional reaction happens inside you, according to your mind, it is happening. This thing you're imagining. You're actually now creating memories of a bad thing that happened. And even though in some rational, vague way you know that this is a prediction, it feels like a very accurate prediction. It's not just a possibility of what might happen, it's more of a this is going to happen and you must respond. The problem with high achievers is because they are actually aware of their success and their accomplishments, they're used to being the kind of big fish in the small pond and outdoing their peers and so on. They come to believe that their mind must be somehow much more accurate than other people's minds, that their thoughts and their ideas and beliefs must be very helpful and accurate because they're so successful. So they actually become more likely to believe what their mind says than somebody else. And that actually puts them at risk of being manipulated by their mind so much more powerfully. That is to say, manipulated by their imagination. When you believe your mind, you won't challenge its lies, and then you will fall for them and you'll react to them as if they're true. There's some common fears that come up. The fear of failing publicly. Again, we have those two problems. Is it likely to happen? And even if it did, would it be that bad? For most high achievers, the likelihood that you're actually going to fail in some big disastrous way is so much less now than it ever was. So even though you are in the spotlight and you've heard of scandals of people like yourself crashing down, Unless you got there by being very deceptive and breaking laws and being a fraudulent person, in which case my material's not for you, because I'm all about integrity. It's very unlikely that you're going to have some big public fall, and even if you did, you would probably survive it and rebuild successfully later. Think of someone like Paris Hilton with her sex tape, or Louis C.K. with his harassment scandal. Both of them bounced back wonderfully from those things, even though that's about as disastrous as a fall as you can imagine, publicly speaking. The likelihood that you're going to have a fall as bad as they did is very unlikely, and yet even they bounced back from those. So why would we be scared of that? The fear of slowing down. The fear that if you kind of button off the pace a little bit, relax and enjoy yourself, that you'll be quickly overtaken by the pack and left in the dust. One of my clients often wakes up in the middle of the night afraid of being homeless, even though he is so far away from homelessness, it's ridiculous. He would have to actually want to be homeless for it to happen. He's got so many, skills and resources and support people in place that he just wouldn't fall that low. He just couldn't, and yet he worries about it all the time as if it's likely, as if he slows down, he'll suddenly be homeless. The irony here, of course, is that some of the most successful people in the world do very little because they understand the difference between leverage and productivity. That Tim Ferriss 4 hour work week thing. Most of the highest high achievers just know which levers to pull and they can do just a couple hours work a day. They can live life quite slowly, whereas the people who are busting their ass 12 hours a day are simply being inefficient. And it's ironic because being that busy is much more likely to lead to failure than slowing down, relaxing, and doing things smart rather than hard. Fear of complacency, this idea that if you enjoy success, something bad will happen to you. You've always got to be burning hard, worried, and stressed. Again, you've got to just ask yourself, where's the evidence that somebody enjoying their success is met with serious punishment of some kind? Who's more likely to suffer, the person enjoying their success or the person burning themselves out and stressed out to fuck because they never stop to enjoy things? I mean, who ends up having the heart attack and the stroke? The idea that slowing down and enjoying yourself is going to cause problems? No, not doing that is going to cause problems. You look at someone like Ricky Gervais, the comedian. He's constantly doing whatever the hell he feels like doing. Sometimes he does big hard bits of work, but the other times he coasts and just does what he feels like doing. He bathes in his success. He even brags about it or sort of jokes about it quite often. He's certainly not humble about it. And the guy just keeps on winning, right? How do you explain him? And of course, the fear of just losing it all due to some freak occurrence, as if being stressed and busy would prevent that from happening. I mean, you're more likely to make mistakes and have accidents if you're not relaxed and your mind isn't clear and your body isn't in good shape. The crazy thing I see quite often with high achievers is they're so worried about something at work going wrong that they end up sacrificing their family. And the big thing really goes wrong when they don't have a relationship with their son when he's in his 20s and it's too late to do anything about it. And the whole time they were worried about that email at the workplace, which actually didn't matter at all. And even if you did lose it all, do you really think you're also going to lose all your skills and your drive and your pattern recognition and intelligence? Like you wouldn't be able to start over again? Have you ever looked at a list of like top actors who started late in life? Morgan Freeman, I think, was in his 40s when he started acting. There's others, top businessmen who are in their 50s and 60s before anybody ever heard of them. The idea that like you've got to make it happen now, no, you could restart any time. The fact that you made it here means you have the skills. It wasn't luck. You could do it again. So it doesn't matter if you lost it all. It would be painful, but not horrific, and yet you stay up at night worrying about it. Tragic irony is that one of the reasons people are high achievers is because they have very active imaginations. I mean, problem solving really takes place in the imagination. It's the ability to see potential pathways into the future, to correlate patterns and events. So generally, that's the kind of intelligence that successful people have in common, but it's a double-bladed sword. It will cut you as well because if you feed negativity into that imagination, you'll get catastrophic cinematic dramas in your head that will crush you emotionally. So this thing that's your greatest weapon is also the thing that will hurt you the most. Your imagination is actually more powerful than your rationality. Rational people are the ones who are in the middle management, the journeymen, the engineers. They're the ones who don't have so much imagination that they create something great, that they achieve the heights. They're just kind of steady and they solve basic level problems. It's the really creative people who are going to suffer because their imagination can turn on them. Imagination is emotional, rationality is facts-based. Rationality is less compelling. Rationality will say to you, like, look, here's the most likely thing that's going to happen. But then your imagination will go like, oh, what if this big fucking amazing happens? Then you're like, oh, geez, he's making a much louder point. Maybe he's more accurate. And that's what it feels like. Most of you know that you're being irrational when it happens. Like, you know that those great disasters you're imagining are not going to happen. And yet you pay no attention to that logic and you just bathe in the kind of misery your imagination comes up with. Basically, there's a failure to engage in critical thinking. Like you're all creativity and no editing. Your mind says you're going to end up homeless, and you don't start with going, that sounds unrealistic. Let's pull that apart a little bit. You just go, oh no, homelessness. Like there's no challenge. And again, I've talked about this before. High achievers often trust their minds because their minds are always there while they were achieving. They give credit to their mind for the successes and don't see that, hey, maybe at least the mind can be wrong sometimes, and actually maybe you're successful in spite of your mind, not because of it. That maybe your imagination has been helpful, but a lot of it was also nonsense that you had to wade through in order to solve real problems. I'll put it out there, you succeed in spite of the voices, not because of them. The solution to getting out of this constant stressful state with driven by your imagination is to become essentially a faithful loyalist for rationality. To start understanding your imagination and your mind as a tool, it is not the truth. That you can use it to solve direct problems that you pointed at, but if you're not doing that, it will just go fucking wild on you and it needs to be managed. All right, you can't let the dog off its leash. It's got a job to do. It's a hunting dog. It's not a run into the sea and do whatever the fuck it wants dog. So when your mind starts coming up with stuff randomly to worry about, problems that are not directly in front of you that actually need to be solved, anxiety rather than fear, you need to get super skeptical. You know how you are with all those salespeople that are approaching you and pitching you all the time? All those emails you get from people claiming that they want to help you, but they just want to get something from you. You know how you look at every word as if it's full of shit? You need to do that with your own head. I mean, one of the reasons you're so successful is because you're good at being skeptical. You know what to say no to, you know who to not believe, you know who to be suspicious of. You need to apply those skills to yourself. When your mind says, oh no, what about this? You go, wait, what sales pitch is this? What kind of bullshit is this? Where's the evidence? Point to it. Where's the thing I have to solve? How are you so sure it's a bad thing even if it did happen? Isn't what I'm doing already going to prevent that anyway? So why are we talking about this? Is the most important thing to solve? Is there something that's more obvious and real that I should be dealing with first? This kind of critical approach to your thoughts, where you treat them like they're coming from a known liar who only occasionally tells the truth. I suggest when you're really ruminating on something dramatic, write it out like it's a legal argument. Start with the devil's advocate approach where you write out the argument from your mind saying, okay, says I'm going to be homeless. Explain to me how that's going to happen, why you think that's going to happen, justify this as a risk that needs to be dealt with, right? And like listen to it. Okay, make your points, but like detach. Like, okay, you just make your points and then we'll see. And then once you've written out those points, attack them like a fucking lawyer. Pull them apart. Go, where's the evidence for that? How come that contradicts that thing? That's never happened before. Why are we treating it like it's an immediate threat? What would I actually do to prevent this happening before I got anywhere near that level of disaster? And so on and so on. And just attack it so hard with logic and rationale that it feels ridiculous to believe it. Do this again and again and again to make up for all the years that you haven't done this. And eventually it will become your default, where you'll be skeptical first as soon as your mind speaks, rather than just embracing every noise that comes into your head. Why do successful people accomplish more than most and yet nearly constantly feel like they're failing? Let's talk about the perfectionism trap. That is why nothing ever feels good enough, especially for high achievers. So there's an inverse relationship between achievement and sense of achievement. We're going to explore why that happens and what you can do about it. There's a kind of infamous story now. One of my clients, Anthony, I tell this to all my other clients. When he was younger, he's got a very clear memory of winning a spelling bee at his school. He was in a spelling test and he got like 99%, I think, on the test and beat everyone else in the class by a lot. And he came home to his super critical, high pressure father and said, look, 99%. No smiles, nothing. His father just looked at it and said, where's the other 1%? This is a very common experience for high achievers in their childhood. This idea that, like, whatever you accomplished, the focus was on the little bit you did not do. Quite often, an imagined failure. You won the running race, but you didn't run fast enough. Even though it was fast enough to win, somehow it wasn't fast enough for some other vague goal. It's this idea that, like, no matter what you do, it just never quite crosses the line. It's close enough to give you hope that maybe next time, if you tried harder, you'd cross the line. But you always seem to imagine how it could have been or should have been better whenever it is you accomplish something, even if you win, even if you outdo anyone who's ever done it before. You notice you can always imagine it being better, and that makes it feel like a fail. You could call this maladaptive perfectionism, which is you have unrealistic standards usually to begin with, and then harsh self-criticism after the event that makes it nearly impossible to actually feel like you've done something well or good enough. So at the start, we get what I call the Everest effect, where you ask too much from yourself. If you imagine here's not doing the thing at all, here's too much, and somewhere in between is enough. Now, a perfectionist would look at that as a failure, and they think it must be this, even though this is excessive and might actually do more harm than good. Let's say, for example, I go to the gym and lift a certain amount of weight. At any given time when I go to the gym, there's the right amount of weight to lift to keep me healthy for as long as possible. There's the kind of longevity lift. I won't always know what it is, but if I pay attention to my body will tell me, like, yeah, stop about now. But then there's the amount I wanted to lift, which is usually so much higher that if I actually did it, I would injure myself. And yet I think of myself as a failure for not lifting that much. That's what we'd call the Everest effect. You're actually asked to do too much, or at least more than is enough, more than is the maximum efficiency. And so you've almost got no chance of achieving it. And then if you did actually happen to achieve it or come close, your brain will still go, yeah, but. It will say, yeah, but you didn't do this, or wasn't fast enough, wasn't good enough, wasn't slick enough, could have been better. Sometimes just vaguely a sense it could have been better, and other times it's very specific unit or quantity of measure that says it could have been better. Quite often it even measures the thing that has nothing to do with quality anyway. Let's say you go talk to a woman you're attracted to, and it turns out she doesn't like you and she's also really nasty and rude. You measure that as a failure, where actually getting someone who's nasty and rude out of your life is a good thing. So you'd say I got rejected rather than I kept a bad person out of my life. So it's measuring all the wrong things in the first place anyway. If she was to actually stay in your life, you'd have a disastrous relationship with her. So how is it a fail to not have her in your life? But mostly what I see is people just measuring what did not happen, what they did not do that could have been better, even though that didn't need to happen and it's all in your fictional imagination anyway. So this kind of perfectionism turns every win into not good enough and just puts more pressure on you for the next time. You end up with this history where you never appease your mind, where nothing you do is ever really applauded and encouraged in here. It's like you're living with this bully in your head who just always says, is that the best you can do? That fucking sucked. No matter what it is you did. So you can't ever win. You can't ever like please that voice. Hint, it's not really your voice. I bet you can figure out whose it is though. Mummy, daddy, a teacher, you know who it is. And so you end up realizing there's a pattern here that the end result of you doing anything is a sense of failure. That no matter how much you achieve, the final result will be a sense of not feeling good enough. And yet you keep doing this because it's either that or feel really not good enough. So you'd rather feel the least amount of not good enough. And you've got this kind of false hope. Maybe this time, if I just tweak this thing and do that a bit more, then I'll finally be enough. Even though that's never happened. And I'm always trying my best. But this time, when I was really suffering from nice guy syndrome and it wasn't really working out for me, I always thought I just got to be even nicer because sometimes it seemed to get a positive response. So achievements do come with little wins and little pleasures, don't get me wrong. I know you're not suffering non-stop. But the problem with those little pleasures, those little dopamine rushes from instant gratification, is it gives you a sense that you're actually on track. That you just, if you got the dials tuned correctly, you could feel like this all the time. Except, of course, you can't. It's not physically possible for a human being to feel happy and satisfied all the time, so you're never going to cross that line. So you create a personal history of failure because you only track your losses, most of which are imagined. You go to the gym and you do 7 pull-ups instead of 10, you track it as -3 pull-ups, when actually you didn't fail at all. You did 7 more than 0. That's great. You're a strong person, probably in the top 10% of strength in the whole world. And yet, as far as you're concerned, you failed to do 3 push-ups. That's how you measured it. And you measure everything like that. So you just got this track record of being a fucking loser who never gets anything right, while you, at the same time, you're somehow contradicted and aware that you are exceeding most people's standards and beating most people and in the top percentile for most of the things you do. I don't know how you try to reconcile that, but you know that that cognitive dissonance doesn't sit well with you. But you're just so sure that you've actually failed all the time because you imagined it. And even when you do actually win occasionally, meet your standards or exceed your standards, and the voice in your head does say that's enough, it just becomes the new expectation. So there's this burden with winning where you're like, now I've got to repeat that. You've probably seen that at work. Maybe you got some great sale on a really hard to get client, and now everyone thinks that you're going to get those sales all the time and you feel like you have to, rather than seeing it as a one-off fluke. So even when you do win, it just makes you more anxious because now you feel like you've got this new standard you have to uphold. So you've just got pressure, stress, no enjoyment, constantly running on that treadmill, and you can't stop yourself. It's like you're a glutton for punishment. It's almost like you want to be miserable, isn't it? It's one of the weirdest things working with my clients and just seeing human beings in general is this idea that we actually want to be happy. Our behavior contradicts that. We seem to be working very fucking hard to be as miserable as possible. Happiness is almost like a random event that sneaks through all the self-sabotage we're doing. Of course, if you want to stop self-sabotaging yourself and actually enjoy being who you are, get in touch, dan@brojo.org, and I'll help you out. So you'll know that you are a maladaptive perfectionist if you have any of these symptoms. Exhaustion, constantly feeling like you're worn out from performing all the time. Shame, a sense that there's something wrong with you, something unfixable, completely broken that you have to hide from the world, which leads, of course, to imposter syndrome. This idea that you're going to get caught for being the fraud that you really are, and that everyone will find out that you're actually this loser who's pretending to be a winner. Self-doubt, where you have to make decisions all the time, but you don't trust the person making the decisions, that person being you. So you feel like you're just taking risks all the time. Of course, the burnout that just comes from never being able to enjoy stuff, but always working really hard. This constant effort, no reward, this low ROI life. People pleasing, of course, trying to get those approvals and validations from others to make you feel good about yourself, often while you sacrifice your relationship with your family and friends to appease total strangers or your boss. And of course, eventually, heart attacks, strokes, and death. That's where this is heading. And I say it harshly like that because your system is really, really stupid. Perfectionism is a death sentence. If nothing else, it's the death of enjoyment, but I think it's actually quite physiologically a death sentence. You're trying to achieve something that can't be achieved because you have a measurement system that can't let you win anyway, and all you're doing is burning yourself ragged, physically and mentally, and eventually you're going to be left with nothing and wonder what was the point. So you think perfectionism helps you. It limits you. All of your success is in spite of that perfectionism, not because of it. You'd be doing even better without it. Isn't that the crazy thing? You think you're so successful now, such a high achiever? It's a fraction of what you're capable of. That's what's really tragic about this. Is this is you with a leash on. I can't imagine how far you could go unleashed. Because creativity is not something you put a leash on. Risk-taking, authentic leadership, perfectionism does not enable those things, it disables them. Think of the difference between doing something right, by the book, perfect, versus doing something freely. One of my clients is a very high-profile writer. His name's Mark. And he's an amazing writer, amazing speaker, very well sought after public speaker. His books are great. But I sent him an exercise where he was allowed to write something that didn't serve a purpose, something that didn't like teach a lesson or provide value to his clients or anything like that. Just something he just wrote for the sake of writing. And I can tell you right now, it's his best writing ever. He's done about 3 or 4 pieces for me, and it's better than any of his so-called great stuff that he's ever written. All the stuff he wrote perfectly to like satisfy the value and productivity and bloody fucking blah. When he just writes a story that he feels like writing, it's fucking amazing. If he wrote more like that, he'd probably get to the next level. Isn't it interesting that we think pressure helps creativity and productivity? Think of what the word pressure means: to squeeze, to tighten, to reduce. Of course, pressure doesn't help. Pressure is like a resistor in an electric system. It reduces the current, it doesn't enable it. You credit pressure for your success when really it's the thing that's been holding you back the whole time. If you were free and light-hearted and enjoying yourself and going with what really interested you and being willing to take risks and get things wrong, you'd be doing so much better than you are. And not only that, you would enjoy it. It's sad that you're not embracing your potential because you'd rather get things right, which you can't do anyway because the system won't allow it. Risk has inherent loss rates to it. If you're taking risks all the time, you're going to lose a certain percentage of the time. If you take stupid risks, you lose a lot. If you take smart risks, you lose 20 to 30% of the time, right? So perfectionism allows for no loss. So you're restricted in your ability to take action because you're not allowed to take risks. You're only allowed to do things that are guaranteed to win. I want you to think of all the masters in the world. Think of I don't know, think of the Beatles. How many albums flopped? How many songs nobody listens to? It's far more than the ones people do listen to. Think of chess grandmasters. Do you have any idea how many games of chess they've lost? Almost half. In fact, think about how many moves they've done that were wrong, how many blunders they've made, and yet they're at the top of the game. How is that possible? Shouldn't they have an undefeated record? No, nobody at the top has an undefeated record. Perfectionists don't get to the top because they're not allowed to get defeated, which means they're restricted. It's like a chess person who only plays somebody who's lower rated than them. They can't get good at chess. Authentic leaders, especially in this day and age, are so revered. They get the best results from their teams. They get the most loyalty. But perfectionism doesn't allow you to be authentic. It doesn't allow you to show weakness, to make mistakes, to hold yourself to account for getting things wrong. Prevents honesty. And so you can lead, but not as effectively as you could if you were authentic. So you're missing out on the leadership results you could have as well. Take a moment. What would it look like to put aside doing things perfectly and try and satisfy that voice in your head who can never be satisfied? Instead, take some risks and do what you really want to do. Do what you really think is the right thing to do. And being willing to fuck up just to see what happens. We're going to talk about the comparison spiral, how success breeds misery because of you comparing yourself to your peers. I've noticed that the more zeros somebody has on their paycheck, the more ambitious and unsatisfied that person is, and the more concerned they are with how many zeros their friend has on his paycheck. So we're going to have a look now at why your enjoyment decreases as the numbers of what you're supposed to be doing well on go up, and how this relates to comparing to others. I'll share a story about a previous dance partner I had. We started as kind of beginners together, and we were entering like beginner competitions and stuff, and we won quite early on. I think we won almost everything we ever did. And so, as you imagine, we just kept working hard and developing our skills. So every time we entered a competition, we were a higher level. And so every time we went in, we'd have to go up to the higher level and compete against the higher level people. I noticed an escalation in her that the higher up we got, the more anxious and worried and the more distressed she got about our performances. At the lower levels, we both really enjoyed it, but by the time we're in the kind of advanced level, it was almost impossible for her to enjoy any form of competitive dance. And even if we won, it'd be a good chance she'd spend a few hours in the toilets crying afterwards over some small flaw in our dancing. It seems like every level up, she compared herself to the next one up. So where if we were amateur, she compared them to pro. If we went pro, she compared to super famous. It's like no matter where we got to, she was looking up and comparing us to that and finding us to be failures, thinking that we weren't good enough. Even as we won competitions, even with gold medals on our chests, she felt that way. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, how comparing yourself to others is not only false, but it's the reason you don't feel any sort of enjoyment about how well you're doing. Why don't you try something for me? Just choose an area of your life, one that's important to you, and just rate how well you're doing. Think of it like how well you're doing overall in that thing. Just take a moment to give yourself a rating. Once you've given yourself a rating, I want you to review how it is you benchmarked that rating. Who did you compare yourself to? Who was it? Like, if you decide that you're okay at something, well, who was good and who's bad? Like, who did you compare yourself to come up with that rating? One of the things you'll notice is that you didn't really look down, you only looked up. You saw how you're doing compared to people who are doing it better than you, longer than you, more successfully than you. And you came up with a rating relevant to them. Just take a moment to give yourself a rating. Once you've given yourself a rating, I want you to review how it is you benchmarked that rating. Who did you compare yourself to? Who was it? Like, if you decide that you're okay at something, well, who was good and who's bad? Like, who did you compare yourself to come up with that rating? And notice that those people you compare yourself to, you don't do a deep dive into their overall depth of psychological satisfaction. You don't know how well they're really doing in here. You just look at some arbitrary measure, some statistic relating to some endeavor that you're doing, assume that they are doing better, often without evidence, and then decide that they're better than you in general. It's kind of like you cherry pick where they're better than you and decide that you're a worse person than them. But you don't look at how their life's actually going. Like maybe they're making more money than you, but their family's a mess. You don't bother measuring their family. You just go, oh, he's making more money. He must be better than me. You don't have a look at their overall life satisfaction. There's probably people you look down on as well. Maybe you look down on some janitor who's working hard with his hands while you've got a nice office job. But if you're inside his mind, you might find it's a much more pleasant place than being inside your mind. So who's actually doing better? As high achievers, we're trained from a very early age to get into what I'd consider to be a toxic achievement cycle made of comparison. So we get a goal. When we're younger, the goal was given to us, and then we took that on ourselves later. Then we go and succeed at that goal. We get a brief high, like, yay. And then we compare up and we realize it wasn't as fast as that guy, or we're not where that guy is yet, or, she's doing better than us in a shorter period of time. And there's immediate deflation, a kind of loss that comes, like the wind gets stripped away as we make the comparison. There's an emptiness, and then we come up with a goal that would fill that emptiness. And the cycle starts again. What ends up happening is we become addicted to external validation, and this becomes less and less satisfying over time until it becomes unsatisfying completely. We rate ourselves compared to others because that's what we were trained to do. Maybe your mum compared you to your brother, the school, when it gives out the test results, everyone knows what everyone else got. Even though they're all completely different kids, they all get the same test. You're compared in that way. Sports teams, were you picked for the team, not picked for the team? Were you a starter or did you start on the bench? We get constantly getting this hierarchy shoved in our face of how we're doing compared to others without anybody stepping in and going like, look, okay, that person might be better than you at football, but he's actually worse than you at reading, so it all kind of balances out. Nobody actually does that. They just go, he's better than you, period. And so you're just constantly surrounded by this reminder that there are people better than you. And even when you're at the top and you've got the crown, there's always this fear that the new, younger, smarter one's going to come take it from you. So you never really get to enjoy that. You become so obsessed with this external validation system that you lose sight or never even develop a kind of inner compass of good and bad. This idea of like you measuring how well you're doing without comparing to others. A lot of you will actually believe that that's pointless, that you must compare to others to get a sense of how well you're doing. And yet, is a comparison to others even a valid measurement? When's the last time you asked yourself, what does it mean to be successful by my standards? When have you stopped following others? You'll notice you don't reference globally. For example, if you make $60,000 US per year, you are in the top 1% financially of the world. Now, it won't be top 1% of the United States. And yet, if you make 60K in the United States, you'll think that you're not doing so well. And yet, compared to the rest of the world, you are fucking crushing it financially. But you don't make that comparison, do you? You only look to your neighbors. I saw a video with Alex Hormozy. He talks about this a lot. This guy makes like hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue every year. And who's he thinking about? The guy who makes even more, the billionaires. Right? He's only looking up, even though he's in the top 0.00001% financially in the world. He's got so much money he could retire now, and his children's children's children would never have to work. And yet he's still thinking, well, I don't make enough money. I used to think my podcast wasn't doing particularly well, right? It's like I only get a couple of hundred listens per episode. And then I had a look at it, and my stats with my podcast puts me in the top 10% of all podcasts in the world. And that's not even including the people who've never done a podcast, which of course I'm doing better than they are. But I just look at the person who's getting thousands of views per month and think, oh. So I'm just looking up at the slight fraction above me, never measuring the massive fraction below me. I mean, if you do anything, you're already doing better than everyone who doesn't do it. And then if you do it well-ish, now you're into the top sort of like 20%, 10%, so on. But you're just measuring the guys in the top 9% who's doing better than you. How is that an accurate or valid measurement of how well you're doing? Even if comparing yourself to others was valid, that's not an accurate way of doing it. If you really did compare yourself to all others, you'd be like, fuck, I'm doing well all the time. I'm near the top all the time. But that's not how you feel, is it? Because you're not measuring accurately. And even when you do compare to others and find yourself to be the winner, you're the top sales guy that month or whatever, the dopamine rush is pretty brief. It's like putting out content. It's just the next day you just got to put out more content. Like there's no finish line. There's no bit where you're like, oh, I win, lock it in. Even an Olympic runner who gets the world record knows that in 4 years' time he might lose it. And he can sense that, and the win depletes pretty quickly. But because you get that dopamine rush, you get this false sense that you're on track. Like, ah, yes, I feel good. I just got to do more of this. The idea that you might be completely off track and just getting a kind of drug high doesn't really occur to you. And this is how we get so far away from integrity when we're high achievers. So you just end up in this endless chase, this competition with your peers, your past self, imagined versions of you, or imagined results that could happen. You're just constantly in competition. You're always looking up, so you're always losing. And you're losing sight of the fact that you're actually doing really well. Of course, there is no finish line. In fact, it only gets worse. You get older and slower and dumber over time. We all do. Have you ever, like, I'm in my 40s now, and I look at the younger generation, what they're capable of doing with technology. I'm like, oh shit, I cannot keep up with that. I don't even want to. I'm too tired to fucking keep up with that. You think of Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example, like, he had the best body in the world, basically, at some point, but he couldn't keep it up. He's in his 70s now, and he's still in pretty good shape, but there's no way he can keep the best body in the world in his 70s. And it's just not possible. So I don't care how smart you are, I don't care how rich you are. There's somebody coming up who is going to overtake you. It's inevitable. So you're in a race that you are doomed to lose. It's like trying to stay alive forever. No, you're not going to. You're going to lose that one. It's a stupid goal to have. And like I said, the tragedy is you've been winning the whole time while telling yourself that you're losing because you're comparing to other people. If you can put food on the table, and you got a roof over your head, and you're doing something that's remotely enjoyable, and you've got a social life, and your body is functioning, you're crushing it, right? Like, the bar is not that high for doing well as a human being, objectively speaking. And you've probably been doing so much more than that, and yet feeling like you're losing. That is irrational. You should feel stupid. And I don't mean that to like kind of insult you, but you think you're being rational when you compare to other people and say, oh, I've got to be better than him. No, you're not. It's a very unintelligent way to measure yourself, a very unhelpful way to measure yourself. Sure, it might motivate you to try and overtake your competition, but have you stopped to ask if overtaking your competition is actually the best use of your time? That that's actually the shortest path to a quality life? Because in the end, you don't get to keep any of this shit. The money, the status, the whatever. That all goes when you die. So what are you trying to hold on to here exactly? Is it really the stuff that you're going to be glad you held on to when you're older? Or are you making a big mistake? You're like a silver medalist at the Olympics, telling themselves that they're a slow runner. So the consequences of constantly being in competition with your peers and comparing yourself to others are pretty dire when you think about it. I think the worst one is you lose your identity, you lose who you are. You become so obsessed with winning, you don't even stop to ask, like, who am I actually trying to be? Like, a winner is not really an identity. Like, I could go beat up toddlers and say I'm the best fighter in the world, but have I actually done something good with my life? Winning isn't everything. And even if winning is important, what are you winning exactly? Have you stopped to think about that? Is this really the most valuable pursuit, the most meaningful thing you could be doing with your life? Probably not. Based on my experience as a coach, there's a good chance you're not on track with that. So you've become nothing but like an arbitrary competitor, just test after test, win after win, loss, win, loss, win, win, loss, win, loss. Never really stopping to go like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Like, if I don't enjoy this, is there another way? And that's the second problem, really, is you start losing joy. Heroin addicts call it chasing the dragon. You never get that first high back. There's a half-life on this shit, like uranium, it just gets less and less impactful over time. I used to be obsessed with trying to conquer women, trying to get laid. And the first time I lost my virginity, you couldn't wipe the smile off my face for 2 weeks. By the 10th girl I'd slept with, I wasn't even satisfied for half an hour. After a while, it became like I had to sleep with someone just to not hate myself. I didn't even get to enjoy it. It got to the point where sex felt like push-ups, something I had to do to like tick the boxes and impress all my mates. I just didn't enjoy it anymore. And if I don't enjoy it, then what the fuck is the point? Of course, you lose the ability to measure success internally as well. You have no idea if how you're winning is even good for you. You're overworking, which you'll probably regret when you're older. You're not focusing on the quality things that are actually important to you. You would know what they were if you weren't so obsessed of beating the person next to you. If you realize that, like, it's okay if the guy next to you at work makes more sales because you spent time with your daughter this weekend. He sacrificed his family to make those sales. He's gonna regret that. Don't worry about his karma. He'll get his. And even if he doesn't, who gives a fuck? You did the right thing with your life. And overall, it builds up to the sense where it just feels like kind of pointless because you just can't win. Like every time you win, there's somebody better than you. And so you lost. And so it's like racing, knowing you'll always come in second place. And no matter how hard you try, you'll just never get that gold medal. And so now you just feel like you're kind of burning yourself out for no reason. Now, it takes a while to get to this point, but once you do, it's a very depressing point. Quite literally create depression. Some people even go as far as being suicidal. And I don't want to get too moralistic here, but you can actually hurt others with this. I mean, think of the affordability crisis. A big part of that has got to be billionaires, right? There are people who are hoarding resources because they're so obsessed with their competition. They no longer need more resources. It's got nothing to do about their survival. At this point, they're just trying to make more money than the other billionaires. And in doing so, the rest of us are going like, fuck, inflation's gone up a bit. Where's all the cash? Well, they're sitting on it, right? So you can get to the point where you're so obsessed with winning the competition that you actually hurt your loved ones, you hurt your greater society. I mean, I've had so many clients I work with, they end up realizing that they work for a company who they morally disagree with, who harms the world, and they've been contributing massively to that just to beat the guy next to them in the office, which their company actually manipulated them into feeling. At some point, you're going to have a reconciliation where you ask yourself, what did I do with my life? Is comparing yourself to others and winning leading to the kind of life that you're going to be proud of? Because if not, it might be time to face that. Such a system does exist, but it does not include, and that winning is beneficial to the quality of life of you and your loved ones. And such a system does exist, but it does not include comparing yourself to others and trying to beat everyone regardless of the sport. You need to stop and think about what that system would look like in order to create the kind of life that you will actually be proud of. What if doing more is actually the thing that's destroying your performance and getting you worse results? I've noticed successful people choose the path of misery, even though they appear to be quite intelligent to everybody else. They somehow make these unintelligent choices that leave them miserable. Let's look at what it means to make good decisions, intelligent decisions, and why high achievers are quite strangely often making bad decisions. I'll share a classic one for me. It's my tattoos. I've designed quite a few of my tattoos or been involved in the design. And I'm not much of an artist, but I kind of like to draw it myself because I'm a control freak. And there's always a point when I'm designing the tattoo where I go too far, where a design that was actually looking all right, I add more to it and make it worse. And it's at that point that I'll get it permanently scarred onto my body, staring at me forever, reminding me that I should have stopped earlier. I believe I'm quite an intelligent person. I have a high IQ. I make a lot of good decisions in my life. I can handle crises. And yet I do have a habit of making these decisions that cause me more harm than good, even when I knew better. And I have seen so many successful people do this. I want to talk about why it happens. Let's contrast intelligent decision making with the kind of compulsive action taking that high achievers are often guilty of. And when I say intelligence, I don't mean that you do well at school academically, but you make decisions that enhance your long-term quality of life and move you towards the deep inner goals that you truly believe in. So it means that you make a decision that has your quality of life front and foremost, that it's going in that direction rather than any other direction. A long-term vision And it's the shortest path to that vision. You're not going the long way around. You're not wasting time. It doesn't fight against the way things are, what's really happening. It accepts that there are short-term costs, that these are investments, that sometimes you have to get uncomfortable, sometimes you have to spend some money, sometimes you have to do the thing you don't want because it's the shortest way to creating the life you do want, being the person you want to be. And the results are all about your internal focus. What is it you can control? What kind of person do you want to be? What really matters and is meaningful. Intelligent decisions line up with all these concepts. High achievers often make a different type of decision. Call it a compulsive achievement decision. It's thoughtless, comes from a habit or a pattern, so they just act without thinking, compulsive or impulsive behavior. Focus on short-term instant gratification, like just getting that sale or getting that promotion or making that girl like you. Not really thinking about where this is going in the long run, whether it aligns with any kind of long-term vision for quality of life. Ends up creating more problems than it solves quite often. So you do something, but then tomorrow now you've got two more problems you got to deal with. Quite often high achievers procrastinate, for example, and then they have to deal with the worst problem of this delayed thing. It's quite often discomfort avoidant. They'll do the thing they feel familiar with, the thing that they're used to, the thing that they think makes them feel good immediately, rather than doing the thing that creates greater results in the future, that's actually quite uncomfortable or unfamiliar to do now. And very focused on outcomes, focused on the stuff that isn't really yours to control, how other people behave, the money in your bank account, all that kind of stuff, rather than focusing on things that, you really have a say over. I'd call that unintelligent decision making. Now, it might seem unrealistic or paradoxical that high achievers make unintelligent decisions, but that's why I often say that successful people are often successful in spite of their limitations, that they would be so much more if they weren't working against the grain so hard with the way their mind functions. I think one of the main issues that leads successful people to make poor decisions or less than ideal decisions. It's because their self-worth is tied up to productivity and external results rather than stuff that's actually really meaningful. They become focused on the kind of the output, what other people would think is valuable or what they think other people would think is valuable, rather than stopping and checking in with what they actually value at a deep core level. Think of somebody who thinks of themselves as a good boss because the profits are up. That might have nothing to do with your leadership. Whereas if you focus on your team having a great culture and supporting them and coaching them and making sure that they're sustainable, that they're loyal and that, that kind of promise for a steady future of improvement, that's a far better measurement and a far more intelligent thing to focus on than the profits, which might have something to do with the markets and nothing to do with how you're being a boss. I had a great example of this when I started a team in Department of Corrections. I was starting a new team, and all the other managers were asked to give me one person each from their team to create this new one, and they all saw it as a chance to offload their poor performance. So I got a team full of the least liked staff members, at least by their managers. That's the kind of decision that I'd call unintelligent. I took those people and I turned it into the highest performing team in the country. And it's not because I'm some amazing boss, but because I made intelligent decisions about the team. I looked for their strengths, I nurtured them, I focused on them rather than results. And so we overtook the other teams because I was focused on the long-term vision of value-based future, while they were focused on feeling good right now. Think if somebody focuses on the size of their muscles rather than on their long-term health. They take steroids, they lift so hard that they rip up all their tendons, they leave themselves in a position where they're going to have back problems or disabilities when they're older. I mean, that's just short-term decision making for instant gratification. Where somebody think about their long-term results, they can go to the gym every day and they're never sore. Somebody trying to get the girl, trying to get laid, trying to impress his friends with how many girls are attracted to him. He doesn't end up in a successful, fulfilling relationship and building a family like he always wanted. I'm not saying everyone should want this, but let's say he does. That's not the path there. That's a long way around. The short path there would be actually be really focused on depth and connection and meaning rather than how hot the girl is and how quickly you can get laid. I can't count how many of my clients had the problem of working hard instead of going to their kids' school performance. There's been some serious research done into what people regret when they're older, and almost everyone regrets not spending enough time with their kids and their loved ones, right? You staying on the weekend to work rather than going to watch your kids play soccer is a grievous mistake that you're going to massively regret. So, what kind of decision making would lead you to think that that was a good idea? Just look at the top regrets of the dying. Bronnie Ware, a palliative care nurse, has done this work. You can look it up. No one ever says, I wish I'd worked more, wish I made more money. Nobody ever says that stuff. They always say, like, I fucked it up. I should have said what I really wanted to say. I should have spoken to the girl that I liked. I should have spent more time with my son. That's the kind of stuff they say, and it's the kind of stuff that we could figure out now and make decisions that line up with that now. We don't have to wait until we're their age and go, ah, damn, I fucked it up like everyone else does. Intelligent decision making means thinking what success really means, not what everyone else applauds you for, not what everyone's going on about on YouTube, but what you would look back on and go, I don't care what anyone thinks, I lived fucking well. When's the last time you really thought about that and applied that to your short-term decision making? This achievement addiction style of decision making, this unintelligence, leads to burnout, tunnel vision, just spending years going down the wrong path. I mean, think about how many times you've been promoted inside a company you actually hate working for. Like how is that a win? You complete the whole task list, and yet most of the tasks are irrelevant. And you'd probably do better if you cut that list down and just did a few things well. You've neglected high ticket items because you procrastinated, just trying to do what feels good and feel like you're winning rather than doing the few things that matter. Think about, I've known quite a few of my clients who are really good at sports, and they're just so obsessed with getting the gold medal that they don't realize that they don't even enjoy the sport. You got to read Andre Agassi's book. I think it's called Open, and it's really fascinating. I mean, one of the best tennis players ever to exist hates tennis. I mean, his life would have been so much better if his dad hadn't pressured him into playing tennis ridiculously, compulsively. He'd stopped and thought, what do I actually enjoy? He wouldn't have played tennis. He would have done something else. He ended up doing something else, but it took him his whole life and he had to sacrifice the health of his back to get there. So I want to introduce you to the idea that slowing down and thinking clearly, as if your short-term quick decision making can't be trusted, even though it brought you this far, might be a better move. To make decisions that are in alignment with your values and your long-term quality of life and get you better long-term results rather than just trying to be productive and show off to people. It's a great example. It's a weird example. The character Littlefinger, Peter Baelish from Game of Thrones. Somebody asks him, I think it's Sansa asks him in the TV series, how do you make decisions? And he says that he has a picture of himself sitting on the throne. And whenever somebody presents an opportunity to him, he asks, does this take me closer to that picture or further away? If it takes him closer, he does it. If it doesn't, he doesn't. Now, he's actually the bad guy, and that picture is a very materialistic, power-hungry one, but the principle's pretty good. If you've got a very clear idea of what you having a high quality of life and loving yourself for who you are looks like, then whenever opportunities or requests come your way, you can ask, does this take me towards that or away from it? And it actually makes it really easy to decide things. It helps you decide what to eat, who to hang out with, what to do with your career. It's really obvious when you look at it that way, but you often find that your compulsive short-term decision making tells you to do the opposite. Maybe the real problem isn't your goals, but the beliefs behind them when you create them. And I've noticed high achievers, they have this talent, and yet they seem to point it at the wrong thing. They've got all this potential, and yet they funnel it towards something that actually makes them miserable. And it makes me wonder, how is it that they went about setting their goals in the first place? So we're going to have a look at goal setting and why it can be your downfall if you're not very clear as to why you're setting these goals. I'll share a story of one of my clients. Her name is Mel. Every year she bakes cakes for her kids' birthdays. And at first it was a really fun thing that she loved doing. She enjoyed the baking. She loved giving to her kid, creating something. But around the time that she decided that this was a tradition, that she was going to keep it up, it quickly transformed over the years into a very high pressure, unpleasant event. She felt very stressed. She was never happy with the result and she would always feel miserable as the kids were eating the cake. Now, the kids never asked her to do this. They're happy with any fucking cake. You give them a box of raisins, they're happy. But she was going through this absolute hell with something that originally started as a good idea. So what went wrong with her goal to make a cake for her kid's birthday? So the problem Mel had is she didn't really consciously set the goals around making the cake. Her original urge to make the cake was from a place of love and creativity and fun, but then she turned it into a tradition. So the goal became must get the cake done and it must be good, rather than enjoying myself and spend quality time with my kids. So the why behind the goal ruined everything. The problem is most of us don't actually stop to think about what it means to succeed. Before we even have that definition, how are we supposed to set goals that are going to be helpful? Most of us have a default definition of success that somebody taught us, and we haven't let go of it. We haven't even questioned it. But I encourage you now to start thinking about what the difference is if success went from being something that's externally based, like always making the cake on time, to something that has internal alignment, like being creative, having fun with my kids, doing something that I love and is meaningful. It's kind of a move from getting the thing or getting the thing done through to becoming the person I want to be. Outcome moving through to more of an action, a process. So I can have the goal of I'll lift 100 kgs at the gym, or have the process goal of I'll always try to make the best decision for the health of my body. It's about learning to base success and then the goals that are attached to that on your values rather than outcomes and impressing other people. So we had to introduce the concept of value-based living. It's this thing that's based in integrity rather than fear and achievement. Making decisions that are about you wanting to be proud of yourself later, regardless of what the results were. You wanting to look at what you did and why you did it, how you did it, and being at peace with that because it aligns with your code. To give you a very brief explanation of core values, think of it as like a set of principles that guide your behavior, and they all relate to each other. They're all complementary. Nobody can ever stop you living by them. You could lock me in a prison cell, and I could still choose to live by the value of responsibility. Values are something people can't take away, they can't affect, they're all up to you, and they got nothing to do with the results. I could be honest and have everyone hate me. I could be dishonest and have everyone like me. Basically, it's a combination of what do you think it means to be decent by your own standards, what it is you admire in the people you look up to, and I don't mean the results, but the way they are and why they do things. What makes you envy people? Things like, I don't know, courage. And what do you hate in people? Are you being a hypocrite? Most people I know would hate being lied to, and yet they lie to others. When you introduce this concept of valued living, you move away from the what happened, the result, to the how and why you did things. And that becomes a thing you measure. That becomes the thing that matters to you. Because it's really the only thing you have. Results are temporary, they've got very little to do with you. Even if you get the sale, it's because the client said yes. It's really up to the client. I'd rather the client says no because I was honest than said yes because I was manipulative. I mean, look at what's happening to all the manipulative online gurus who first blew onto the scene like 10, 20 years ago. They're all having all these problems with fraud cases. Their reputations have been tarnished and trashed. They're not doing so well now. The people who stuck with integrity didn't blow up as big back then, but they're still around now. I want to share with you some healthy psychological habits that will allow you to shift this system to create goals that you can actually achieve in a healthy way and feel good about sustainably. Celebrate your wins, but your wins are not results. That's when you did the right thing for the right reason. You put the effort in that you're proud of, and that your motive for doing it was something you feel is healthy. So if I was boldly assertive with the guy on the street and he yelled at me and made a scene and humiliated me, that's actually a win. You start learning to identify and accept the idea of good enough. There's a certain point, what we call maximum efficiency point, where actually that is enough to get the goal achieved. Any more than that would be pointless. For example, spending quality time with my daughter. 20 to 30 minutes a day is enough for that. And if I was actually to spend all day every day with her, I'd create an unhealthy attachment between us where she wouldn't be able to attach well with others. So there's actually a maximum amount of playtime we can have together before it actually starts being harmful or at least pointless. Yeah, you could make more money every day, but at some point you're making more money than you need and you're just burning yourself out and not focusing on your health and not spending time with your family. So it's not the most efficient amount of work. Most efficient amount of work is something you could sustain forever and all the other areas in your life are not harmed by it. Accepting losses. Integrity sometimes hurts. Sometimes people don't like you. Sometimes you lose money. Sometimes doing the right thing has an immediately negative reaction, but that doesn't mean you did the wrong thing. You've also got to understand there are certain losses that are a sign you're doing the right thing. If I lose 50% of my chess games, for example, it means I'm taking on tough opponents. That's brave of me. If I was winning every game, it'd mean I was being a coward. If you're not hearing clients say no, then you're not fishing big enough. You're not pushing yourself to like have a stretch and go for it for the thrill of the hunt kind of thing. It's not about the money, but you should be hearing no from clients if you're trying to work with the right kind of people. Allowing yourself to rest. This is a big one. I know you'll feel guilty doing it. It's really hard to do. But even cars need gas and maintenance. Even Formula One drivers have pit stops. The ones who don't have pit stops don't win the race. And that means taking time off, not working through the whole weekend. It means going on holidays sometimes. It means replenishing the system so that you can do this forever rather than just doing it for a few years before you have a fucking heart attack. Breaking the comparison habit. This is a huge one. If you want to live with integrity, nobody else is going to be able to measure this for you. Comparing to others is going to be completely worthless. Nobody else's behavior tells you how well you're living by your values. So instead of creating fictions about how you're doing compared to others, understand that their successes might have nothing to do with your values. The guy earning twice as much money than you might be committing fraud. Do you really want to earn money that way? And challenge your perfectionist thinking. One way to look at it is if you really want to make progress, think how wise am I becoming? There should be a lot of mistakes and failures in somebody becoming wise. If I'm going to hire a bodyguard, I want to go with a broken nose and a scarred up eye and cauliflower ears. I don't want the polished guy who's never been punched in the face. I don't care how many black belts he's got. I want the guy who's actually lost a few fights and knows what it's really like. I don't want to do everything perfectly because I'd have to sacrifice my values and I'd have to put a lot of pressure and stress on myself. I'd much rather enjoy what I'm doing and do things in a way where I'm progressing, which means I'm challenging myself, I'm learning hard lessons, I'm getting better. Now, what I'm talking about is not going soft. It's not some self-help bullshit. This is the foundation of sustainable living and leadership. You are going to do better overall. You'll be calmer, you'll have a better sense of humor, which means you'll slow down, make smarter, more intelligent decisions. You won't be defensive and easily manipulated by others because you're not constantly comparing yourself and putting yourself in that insecure position that's easy to maneuver. You'll double down on what matters rather than trying to do everything all the time and just being mediocre. And you'll be going towards a higher goal. Everything will be contributing and accumulating, compounding over time rather than just like a dog chasing every smell you get that leads nowhere. Valued living is about slowing down to speeding up. It means you do something that looks like you're going to get lesser results now, but you're actually building a much more solid foundation for a greater life quality overall. What if success without feeling fulfilled is actually failure? A lot of people struggle with that paradox where the more you work on yourself, the more you feel like a failure because you're always looking for things to work on. But there is a solution to this. There is a way to succeed and enjoy it along the way. So here's the paradox. If outward winning means inner losing, then your achievements are hollow and pointless. And doing more of it is only going to get you more of the same results. So if you've been doing this for a long time and it's just getting worse for you, you're not feeling very good about your achievements, then maybe you need a different approach. It doesn't mean you have to give up everything you've ever worked on, completely turn your life in a different direction, but it could just be a simple perspective shift. You got to remember that triumph is not the same as contentment. I know you feel wins occasionally. You get a yeah feeling when you succeed every now and then. Probably not as often as you used to, right? But that triumphant feeling, there's an unhealthy edge to that feeling. That kind of like dominant fucking feeling. It's an aggression to it that kind of gives you a hint that maybe it's not coming from the healthiest place. Whereas contentment with who you are as a person is a much more mellow, sustained feeling that isn't reactive to any outside external event. Feeling confident in yourself doesn't require you closing the big sale or beating that guy on the golf course. It's just a feeling you wake up with in the morning because of a sustainable way of living that you've engaged in that you call success. I honestly think ambition is a kind of sickness, a sickness I used to suffer from. Many of my clients suffer from it. It's a never-ending hunger. It's a sense that nothing's ever enough, that you must always get more, that today's contentment must come from productivity today, and that when you sleep tonight, it'll all be wiped out and you have to start over again tomorrow. That's why I think anyone who's a billionaire or anyone who's obsessively famous or anyone like struggling to get political power, all of these people are mentally ill. You must be quite dysfunctional psychologically to yearn so hard for something, to be so unsatisfied that you have to keep climbing the ladder. One of the reasons I say this is everyone that you're struggling to aspire to, everyone that you're chasing, everyone doing better than you, is probably less able to find contentment than you are. So you got to ask why you admire that, why you pursue that. When I look at some businessman making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, I think, oh, I want to do that. I don't stop and think like, why the fuck does he need that much money? How many kids has he got to feed? You know? Well, the only thing going on, he has a hole in his psyche that he cannot stuff enough money into to feel satisfied. Why would I want to be more like that? It's a horrible existence. Why can't I be satisfied with enough money? Wasn't that a better goal? Wasn't that more successful? Fulfillment, enjoying yourself, being okay with your life the way it is, that's not the enemy of success. It's a multiplier. The more you like that, the better you do. You got to understand that, like, being satisfied with where you're at, isn't that the goal? Isn't that the very definition of success? So if your current definition of success means you must always get more, then it's a contradictory definition. It means you've actually defined failure. You're seeking failure all the time. If you make money and you don't spend it, what the fuck was the point of making money? Go on holiday, give it to a charity, hire a friend so that they don't have to work. Like, you get so much more satisfaction out of doing that, and you'll probably end up making more money anyway. I'm not saying blow all your money, it's not a black and white thing. But what's the point of acquiring something if you're not going to put it to use? Money is useless on its own. It only has any value when you spend it. If sleeping around, putting lots of notches on the bedpost, as we used to say, ends up with you feeling lonely or misogynistic, what was the point of it? If you want to feel love and connection, should you not be pursuing that directly? Right? Maybe you should slow down and go deeper and more meaningful with people instead of trying to impress your mates with how often you can get laid. One thing I used to love when I became a manager, when I finally clicked onto this idea, was I made sure my team got all the glory and that my whole job was focused on making them shine. So my team would always look great and nobody would know I had a part in it. But when somebody offered them a promotion to leave my team, they would refuse it because they wanted to stay working with me because I was such a great coach for them. But I wasn't getting any of the glory. And I found that the glory was such a pitiful thing to go for. I'd much rather see these people that I nurtured, like plants I'm growing in a garden, see them succeed was so much more rewarding for me. And I realized that that's what success really is. Look, I'm not asking you to flip-flop completely on everything you've ever believed in, but think of it more of a blend of achievement and results with values and integrity. Like, think of achievement, but you earn it with valued living. It's okay to celebrate making a sale with a client, so long as you did so with honesty and integrity and trust and respect. Then it's like a double win. And you might have to take some losses to create that kind of win at first, but then the build up, the accumulation of you having a reputation of being like this means you'll actually make more sales in the future, probably too. And even if you don't make as many, they'll be much more satisfying. They'll have a longer lasting sense of contentment. Think of success as integrity in spite of the resistance, right? You're going to have distraction, fear, temptation. We're surrounded by other people who don't live with integrity. If you're an honest person, there's a good chance you'll be the only person in the office who is honest. Being one being part of a few people who have the balls to have integrity and a sea of people who are too scared to do it, that's quite an achievement. If you're going to compare to others, compare on integrity. It's a much easier win, I'll tell you. That game's fucking rigged, mate. There's no competition. I can walk into almost any room and be the most honest person in that room. Now, I don't actually pride myself on that. I try not to. I try not to measure myself on that. But if I wanted to, I don't have to worry that I'm going to come out not good enough. It's easy to be the most honest person in the room. It's easy to be the person who takes responsibility when the rest of the team refuses to. It's easy to be the most courageous person socially. The competition's really, really grim. Learning to enjoy rationality over compulsivity. Learn to control yourself rather than trying to control others and outcomes. To think longer term, to slow down and make sensible decisions that might cost you a bit now, but you know it's good for the long term. You can feel really good about making those smart decisions, much better than you do about getting an instant gratification that you have to fix tomorrow because it caused two new problems. Overall, it's about thinking about your well-being rather than short-term highs. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other, but if you prioritize well-being, you'll also get some short-term highs, but you'll get a kind of more mellow high more consistently. For example, you might get a big pump from lifting your personal best at the gym. There's nothing wrong with that. But being healthy all the time is a sort of more mellow high that you can have that doesn't require these peaks and valleys, and you never injure yourself and you're never comparing yourself to the other lifters at the gym. Most importantly, going for meaning. rather than approval and status, impressing your parents because they never were satisfied. Like doing things where you go like that mattered to me. That was important. Even if nobody else noticed it, I knew it was the right thing to do. Think of yourself as being a role model to your kids. Think of yourself when you're on your deathbed, looking back over your life, what kind of person you are. What do you want people to say about you at your funeral? Like, what really actually matters to you if you can just get your head out of the achievement game and focus more on doing things that are important, that have purpose to them? Odds are this won't completely transform your life. You're not going to give up being the CEO to go work in the forest. Some of you might. I'm not saying that like being successful is bad at all. What I'm saying is you could enjoy it if you did it for different reasons and had a different focus besides trying to be the best. I want you to notice something about Elon Musk. As far as business and financial success and even power and status goes, he's winning by everybody's standards, isn't he? Year after year, he just increases. He's about to become the first trillionaire in the world. He was the right-hand man in the White House for a short period of time. He owns one of the largest communication platforms in the world. He's crushing it. But of course, being in the limelight, we learn all these other things about him, and one is that his family and his friendships deteriorate over time. It is hard to know exactly what's going on there, but it's not going well. I'd put it out there that almost anyone who's a billionaire is almost certainly mentally ill. You must be to think you don't have enough resources and to keep accumulating at that point. You can be high achieving and deeply fulfilled and sustainably effective. You can have it all. You just have to give up the instant highs. Thank you so much for watching, listening. Really appreciate it. I hope something helpful happened in there for you. I'll see you all next time.